Today is March 11th, and the chronological Bible reading is Deuteronomy chapters 1 and 2. Here in these chapters, we see a recap of the travels through the wilderness. Moses is retelling the people what took place, and many of them are young. All of the fighting-aged men have died out over the last 40 years and been replaced with a new generation. So it's helpful not only that he preserved it for our sake, but clearly he was speaking to the people of that day, praying, I'm sure, that they would learn the lessons from the mistakes of their forefathers. In verse 10, he says, Yahweh your God has multiplied you so that you are as numerous as the stars in the sky, which is a direct word-for-word fulfillment of the promise that God made to Abraham all the way back before his name was even Abraham in Genesis 12. Have you ever thought that you are the answer to somebody else's prayer? Even more than that, you are the fulfillment of a prophetic word that someone else received. Spiritually speaking, we are still descendants of Abraham. And that's astounding 3,000-4,000 years later. But even for the people you know, your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, your spouse, you are an answer to their prayer, to their parents' prayer. How wonderful is it to know that you and I are fulfilling the destiny that was carved out for us through the prayers of those who went before us. It should embolden our faith, and it should call us to a higher standard as we think about who God created us to be in partnership with our own ancestors. And not just our ancestors, but our spouses, the people we go to church with, the people we live around, the people we work with. Have you ever prayed that God would send you a Christian to your place of business, that you would have somebody to fellowship with at work? Has it ever occurred to you that you also are the fulfillment of a prayer that somebody else prayed? How much more intentional must we be to walk out that calling? God reminds the people through Moses in verse 6 of chapter 1, you have stayed at this mountain long enough. It's time to move on. It's time to step into the calling and the destiny that I have prepared for you, says Yahweh. What is that thing you've been dreaming of? What is the promised land in your own life? Maybe it's a ministry God wants to birth through you. Maybe it's a new business venture. What is God blessing you with and partnering with you in? What is it that he is saying to you right now? It's time. Step into your calling. Through Moses' recounting of the history of the past 40 years for the Israelite people, talking about the Amorites and the Zamzumites and the Edomites and the Anakites and all of these different people, when you do the research into who these people groups are, they were giants. Many of them were 12, maybe 15 feet tall. They were scary people. It's one thing to march out to the war today with body armor and tactical training and guns that will shoot a mile. Our combat veterans shoot very close groupings at 1,000 yards. It wasn't so in the Israelites' day. They would have to go out with clubs and spears and swords against people 2 to 3 times their size, maybe even larger. For more information on the size of these giants who ruled the land, go to the conversation I had with Joel Thomas, and he breaks down the history of the people from whom Goliath was a descendant. And we know from the biblical record, Goliath was 9.5 or so feet tall. And I bring that up because it's important for me to remember that it was scary, the things God was calling them to. Go and take the land, he would tell them, but then they would see these huge people who were big and fast and so strong. How terrifying must that have been? It's so easy for me to think if I had been there, I would not have acted the way they acted. And yet, by the grace of God, He didn't place me there. He placed me here. And it's so easy from the comfort of my air-conditioned home in Florida, United States, that those people should have been better. It's so easy for me to think that. And yet to do so would be to fall into the trap of pride. And it's only by the grace of God that I didn't and am not making the same mistake. But if I'm very honest with myself, I have made the same mistakes. When times were difficult financially, I feared for losing my home. I feared, where is our next meal going to come from? What are people going to think if I fail at this business venture? What if I make this podcast and nobody watches or listens? What if they laugh at me? And I think if we're really honest, we're all afraid of rejection by other people. We're all afraid of failure in whatever it is we set out to do. And so often many of us just never even try because we're gripped by fear if we really honestly evaluate where we are and why we do what we do and why we don't do what we don't do. I don't know about you, my friends, but I have so much work to do in this area. And so it's with humility and reverence for who God is that I say, but for the grace of God, there go I. Father, keep me from making the same mistakes that the Israelites made, that even I have made in the past. Help me to grow. Help me to be better. Help me to be more like you. Help me to be more like Abraham and more like Moses, more like Joshua and the other great people of faith. Deborah, fearless like Jesus himself. And may it be true for you also. God bless you, my friends. Thanks for being on this journey with me through the Bible in a year. We'll see you tomorrow.